Hey guys, Victor here, and today we're going to be doing another discussion video with today's topic being the appeal of rogue and trading card games. Now, this is a little bit of a weird one because a lot of players think, why would you want to play rogue, right? There's pretty much always going to be like a better deck available to you, which will help you win a lot more consistently. And to that I say, it's not always about playing the best deck in the format. Sometimes you just want to pick something that you actually enjoy or is a secret meta call. You never know. Just because it's rogue does not mean it's good. Now, by rogue, I mean that the decks struggle to consistently top high level events, and they typically need like a really skillful pilot to actually do well. So just because something gets like one top at a high level event every once in a blue moon does not mean it's not a rogue deck. Like I said, you have to top back to back to back to back in order to actually be considered good top tier, tier 1, tier 2, things of that nature. So by the end of this video, hopefully I'll be able to convince you, to want to give rogue decks a try. If not, no big deal like always. But it'd be great if you want to consider them, And with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into the video. Now, when it comes to actually picking up a rogue deck for trading card games, there's a lot of valid reasons why someone would actually want to play it. But one of my favorites, and this is going to be like on the more toxic side, is that it provides a player with the ultimate option select, or you may also know it if you play fighting games, the perfect excuse for why you lost. And this is a technique that's pretty much as old as time itself, and it's used to help players justify a loss when you're competitive but you hate losing, since you can pretty much just brush off a loss by saying, well, of course I lost, it's only natural that you lost, right? My opponent played the superior deck, meanwhile I'm playing a tier 75 garbage rogue deck that pretty much should have never been seeing the light of day. And there are some people that have this mentality in real life, and it gets very exhausting very quickly, so I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're just trying to have like a little bit of fun, it's okay. Especially if you're like playing with friends and you're just helping them like test, for example, right? But you typically want to avoid this type of mentality for anything competitive, just because it shows that you have like a fragile ego and you're probably not the greatest to hang around with. So yeah, for competitiveness, even though this is ever present, you should try to avoid it as much as possible. And then speaking of competitive, that's actually what the next topic is going to be, and that's about how rogue can actually help you with your competitiveness in trading card games. Now, when it comes to playing rogue in a competitive environment, there are honestly some really solid advantages that you get just because your opponents are a lot of the time just unfamiliar with the cards that you're using. And thanks to their unfamiliarity with the cards, you can get some advantages, such as them stopping the wrong cards or reading effects incorrectly, which pretty much just amount to your opponent wasting resources on cards that you don't care about just because they don't know what to stop, right? And by doing this, these misplays add up very quickly and can very easily spiral out of control for your opponent, which in turn allows you to win the game a lot more easily than if your opponent had actually known what your cards did. So I guess in a sense, it pretty much gives you like an aspect of surprise, I guess, just because your opponent is going to be caught off guard and it's going to take them a lot longer to actually learn the familiarities. And by a lot longer, I mean it's definitely going to take a lot more than a game or two for them to actually be completely familiar with your deck, especially if you're like hiding information for games 1 or games 2 and 3, because game 1 pretty much just showed like the minimum aspects of what your deck can accomplish. However, even though these are some pretty good advantages, there are also disadvantages of playing a rogue deck competitively, and they pretty much have to do with like the power level, right? So let's face it, if you're playing a rogue deck, your deck's gonna have like a lower overall power level compared to like the rest of the decks in the tournament. If it wasn't a lower power level, it would be compared to like, it would be classified as like a tier 1 or a tier 2 instead of a rogue deck. These are just facts of life. But the biggest disadvantage to playing a rogue deck is that misplays are honestly just brutal, because compared to like the top tier decks, if you misplay with a rogue deck, a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, that can just straight up end your game, just because you don't have the flexibility or the the foolproofness that top tier decks tend to have. So if you're playing a rogue deck competitively, it's pretty much going to require you to commit entirely to the one deck. But once you've committed entirely to the deck and you're pretty much like a master with it, you can enjoy the best aspect of playing rogue, which is going to be our next and final topic, being winning with a rogue deck. Now, when it comes to playing a rogue deck in just any trading card game, let's face it, the feeling that you get off of beating tier 1 and tier 2 decks is just fantastic, and there's a lot of different reasons to actually go into it. And the first one is that when you're playing a rogue deck, you typically have to work way harder just to actually pull off a win, and that's because they're rogue for a reason, right? And if you're playing a tier 1 or tier 2 deck, you can typically accomplish what a rogue deck is trying to do a lot more easily with way fewer resources. So just being able to pull off the win is honestly just a fantastic feeling that you don't get to experience without like consistently playing a rogue deck against these top tier threats. And that's not to say that every rogue deck feels like this, right? Because there are some really degenerate aspects or decks in rogue that are just trying to FTK, hand loop, things of that nature. If you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh anyways, but I'm sure like there's a bunch of degenerate rogue decks just waiting in the range for other games as well. So, uh, you know, but typically that's not the case. You typically do have to work way harder just to try and achieve similar results. And if you are able to achieve them, this is a great way to actually just flex on your opponents, right? Because let's face it, um, it is a lot more difficult, like I said, to actually pull off a win with these rogue decks. So just being able to flex that you actually were able to pull it off is great. And by flexing, you typically have your opponent become like embarrassed because as they're playing like the tier 1, tier 2 decks, they have like this mentality that they should pretty much always win against everything that's not tiered because those decks are garbage. And they tend to get pretty angry about it. Now, I don't mean like flex maliciously, of course, just like flexing your head, thinking about like, God, I'm so good at this game, inflate your ego a little bit. Don't actually do it out loud. But yeah, people are not happy when they lose to rogue decks, especially like myself included, right? If I'm playing like a tier 1 deck, I expect to beat everything that's rogue. And the fact of the matter is, you're just not always going to be able to do it. And I guess the final thing that I want to talk about when winning with a rogue deck is that a lot of these times, the rogue deck that you choose is like one of your favorite decks. It just happens to be pretty decent at the moment. Like take hero players, for example, right? Whether they want to admit it or not, this deck is rogue at best. But there's no greater feeling in the world than actually being able to play your favorite deck and actually win with it. And that's, at the end of the day, that's pretty much like one of the more important aspects of trading card games that you can have. You just want to play something that you really enjoy and then you want to win with it. And with that, that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.